Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Keddie Cabin Case series. We are examining the Keddie Murders, one of the most gruesome crimes in history. This is episode 2, our continuing examination of different suspects, different theories, and a lot of the issues in this case that make it one of the most perplexing in history, with so many rabbit holes, so many shady connections, so many coincidences. I mean, this one is really giving the Maura Murray case a run for its money in just the amount of shady business involved in Keddie, the individuals in and around Keddie that are associated with this crime. All very, very tragic, but this is Mindshock, and we are going to do a logical examination of every single theory and every single suspect, with logic and reason at the forefront, attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting and informative, and want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notification. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Support the channel that way. Get access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share. Keep the awareness up in this case. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case, topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, thoughts, theories, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, we're going to take a look at this 2005 documentary on the Keddie Murders. And we're just going to listen to a couple of clips from it in attempting to piece together what's going on with Marty Smartt. Now, this is the individual, the neighbor, who many believe is responsible for the crime with his mobster from Chicago buddy, Joe Bo Deeb, or Bo Deeb, depending on where you look. So, again, so many issues with the timeline, with the way the bodies were found, with the way everything unfolded. Nothing seems to make any sense, with the kids in the next room remaining, for the most part, unharmed. You know, they weren't actually physically beaten or killed, obviously. Who knows whether they saw part, if any, of the crime, or were even forced to participate, as some allege. And then, of course, we do have Justin Smartt's DNA intertwined with the crime scene. Although, here's the thing. Is it possible Justin touched some of the tape, medical tape, whatever, wherever his DNA was found? Is it possible, if this was taken from the Smartt home, that he could have touched it there and not have been involved in the crime? I don't know, just throwing theories out there. But let's look at the issues surrounding Tina. And again, if you haven't checked out the first episode, make sure you check it out, because it lays the foundation. This is a very complex case, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of characters. So let's examine this here.
November 1980 is when we moved into Keddie in a small cabin, which was number 28. Rick Gregg slept in one room. My mom, Tina, and I slept in another room. And Johnny, there was a basement downstairs, and since he was ill, he got to sleep down there. Johnny had scruffy blonde, I think dirty blonde hair. He had blue eyes, and he was small like the rest of us, but don't get me wrong, he made up in that he was very, very feisty. And I think that night, that's what happened to him, is he was defending the family, which he would do at any cost. He always stuck up for me at school or wherever for any of us. And I think that's what happened that night, is he was defending Mom and Tina and the rest of the family. When I went over to Alicia's that night, to spend the night, I didn't know where Tina was. She could have been outside playing or...
And again, just the recap here. We went over the theory that Sheila Sharp, in cahoots with all these different individuals, set this crime up. So this is the Keddie28.com theory. So again, we have so many oddities this night. So Tina usually stays over at the Siebold house next door. On this particular night, however, Sheila Sharp switched places with Tina. So we're examining the testimony here. This is Sheila.
You know, at the house, who knows at this time. I do know that she wanted to spend the night, but Alicia and I wanted it just to be the older girls, nobody else. You know, we're being stingy, I guess.
I remember Tina and Sheila coming over, and Sheila was going to stay all night with my daughter Elisa, and Tina wanted to stay, and she stayed every Saturday night, and so I just thought it would be really nice if Sheila stayed by herself that night.
So this is kind of weird. So the Seabolts, Zonita Seabolt, the neighbor, she's saying, was this her idea? That the older, did she really kick Tina out because she thought it would be a good idea for just the older girls with to Sheila to stay over? Why wouldn't she let them both stay over? I mean, none of this really makes any sense. Some people say this is Duper's delight on Zonita's face because she can't stop smiling in all of her interviews about the murders here. But yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I really don't know what to make of the testimony here from Zonita, and then also from Sheila, who basically can't remember too much about that situation.
Tina was just beautiful. She had blonde hair that was kind of shoulder length and kind of unkept, but it looked good. You know, it was kind of like she was a free spirit, if you will. She had these incredible, huge blue eyes that kind of overpowered her whole self. I mean, that's what captured you when you looked at her. You didn't see really her hair or anything like that. You were just captivated by her eyes.
I remember Tina as being a little bit slow at school. She was in special education classes, and that's all I can relate to her being slow, because she was a normal kid to me.
As a student, Tina was not at grade level. She was in a special ed class and getting extra help. I would help her one-on-one, but she really didn't get the help that she needed at home. She was struggling with everything. But she was one of the sweetest, nicest little girls I think I've ever had.
When I walked in the house that morning, what I saw was a person right at the door with their hands and feet tied. I dropped all my, I guess I had sleeping bag, clothes right there, and ran back to the Seabolts where I stayed the night before.
She was back in just a few minutes, and she was just screaming and crying hysterically. She says, "My God, there's 3 dead people in my house." And she didn't know who they were. And I ran across the street to we didn't have a phone, and I ran across to the people that owned the house, owned Keddie at the time, and I had them call the sheriff.
One of the things I did see as well was a knife, which I thought at the time was a pocket knife, and come to find out it was a bent steak knife that they had used on, I don't know if all of them or one of them. After the police were called, we then ran back next to my house to the side window where Rick, Greg, and Justin were sleeping, and got them out through the window. I did not want them to see what I saw, and who knows if somebody else was still in the house at the time.
Now that's an interesting comment from her. Who knows if somebody else was in the house at the time? So again, just from her body language and talk, like I do not get a sense at all either way whether she's complicit in these murders or totally innocent and traumatized. I mean, it does seem like she definitely has some kind of information though. Just from the switch up with the sleepover, I mean, is it something as simple as maybe they got in, two sisters got into a fight and then now, there was no intention to murder her family as Keddie28.com alleges that. But the thing is, like, the connections between all these other people. Is it possible Sheila is not really involved in this, but all these other people are? Is that a possibility? And she just, again, to Keddie28.com's eyes, they think she's involved because logically it seems like there can't be any other way that she's not, but perhaps she's not. Let's not fall for these black and white logical fallacies. Even if these other people somehow maybe are involved, that doesn't mean she's involved. But if she does have the real answers on this switch up, on why her and Tina switched places that night, and it might have nothing to do with the murders. That's just another possibility. We're examining all angles here. And yeah, there's a lot of problems here. I'm going to get into another mind-shocking theory in a moment here. We're going to examine some of Justin's words now.
Apparently, the bodies are pretty hard to tell who's, they were bashed in so bad or something to that effect. What amazes me is that the kids sleeping in the bedroom didn't hear a thing. How can that be?
There's a very good chance that I had witnessed something, whether it be the crime itself or the aftermath. The morning after the crime had occurred, after the police arrived, I was being interviewed by Doug Thomas, and he conducted the interview inside of his patrol car, probably because it was raining out and we didn't want to be exposed to the elements. I had made several remarks in reference to where is Tina? Tina's missing. And the sheriff or the detective was not acknowledging any of the statements that I was saying. He actually had to be interrupted by my mother and told, will you be quiet for a moment and listen to what this boy is telling you. He is telling you that Tina is missing.
What Justin was saying was, no, that is not Tina in there. That's Sue in there. And to go look for Tina. Tina's missing. He kept saying that over and over. Tina's missing.
Well, we're trying to locate Tina. We believe that she's an integral part of this and that she may be the clue that we're looking for. She's a girl of 12 years of age with shoulder-length hair. It's dark blonde in color, and she has light blue eyes. She's very slightly built, and one would maybe mistake her for a 9-year-old.
Are you going on the assumption that she has been kidnapped or run away?
Well, we know that she was in the residence, and at this point we have to go into the assumption that the assailant or assailants took her with them.
I just assumed that somebody took her because she was so pretty and that they just wanted her to be their own. I mean, I had no idea at that time. I was so naive that anything horrible could happen. But I just figured, they wanted her so badly that they would do anything to have her.
When the Keddie murders happened, Tina was not found. They didn't know where she was. And I went out looking for her. I always thought that if she were alive, she would come to me. She knew where I lived. She knew I cared about her. And she never came. So I was out tramping around in the mountains, and I'd get in my car and I'd go down the canyon, and I'd go into all the little roads and streets roads down there, just seeing if I could find something. I still can't go down the canyon without thinking about Tina.
So, actually, that teacher seems like the most, the most grief-stricken out of all these individuals. And again, that's not to say that her sister or the neighbors or whatever don't feel bad about it. They might be more directly traumatized, particularly Sheila. But what do we make of Justin's testimony here? He's got that 1,000-yard stare. Now, this is common in both severely traumatized individuals and also serial killers. Now, again, I'm not alleging that Justin is guilty of any crime here. I'm just saying it's hard to tell. Like, you can't just immediately say the 1,000-yard stare definitely means this or it definitely means that. That would, of course, be a false dichotomy or black and white logical fallacy. We don't do those. So, again, he said it's possible he might have witnessed something. What does that mean? So, again, this is a 12-year-old, so that's an interesting age, because that's not so young like the 5-year-old, where by all accounts it would seem very likely that the brain would protect itself and it might have intentionally just removed those memories to again, a self-defense mechanism. Now, that's not to say a 12-year-old's brain wouldn't do that either. It's possible. It's definitely possible, but just the phrasing, the hypnotism, I mean, something seems weird here. Now, I'm going to throw out a really out there theory. This has been discussed on several forums. I don't think it's a popular theory, but it's a theory out there. Are we assuming that Tina was actually taken by the criminals here, by the murderers? Some people allege, again, local rumors or whatever, that Justin and Tina were kind of an item. Now, again, item doesn't, at their age, that could literally mean basically nothing, that they're friends, but whatever. And if they care about each other, is it possible that whatever was going on, if Tina ran into their room and they were all hiding and they knew something was going on and Justin knew that Tina ran for help? What if Tina left the cabin on her own? And then, I mean, there's a can of worms there. Depending on how many individuals were involved, it would seem likely that they would grab her anyway, these same murderers. Although you could argue theoretically another criminal might have grabbed her elsewhere. And we don't know the exact spot that she was grabbed, but is it possible she left the cabin on her own, even if she only got like 10, 20 feet or whatever? That would change the dynamics of the entire crime. Is that a possibility? And is that why? And if Justin was so sure, because the body is supposedly, they're really disfigured and bloody, and he supposedly did not see the scene. So why is he the one telling the sheriff, that's Sue in the room and not Tina, you have to find Tina, when he supposedly never even saw the crime scene? And yet he's telling the sheriff, you have to find Tina. Now, again, we went over the whole timeline where nobody even knew she was missing and they were ignoring this kid. And it's just, the whole thing's weird. And then they didn't want to look incompetent, so then they were kind of pretending that they didn't ignore him after the fact. So this is just one big mess across the board. All right, let's continue with the interviews here, see what we can make of the sheriff's words. There's an FBI agent here that worked on the case that also describes the crime scene. So let's continue here.
For Plumas County, the Keddie murders were indeed a shock. After all, this county only has 17,000 people, only 33 sworn officers, and at one point, 1/5 of those investigators were working on the Keddie murder and kidnap.
Politics played a big role in the whole thing. We had a sheriff that was trying to make probably more of a name for himself, and rather than relying on the expertise of the Department of Justice when it first started out, he tried to do things himself, and I think hurt the case quite a bit.
We collected evidence from throughout the room and from throughout the house, actually. Anything that we could believe that had a connection with the homicides. We even tore some panels off the wall because there was blood there. And then all of that was sent to the Department of Justice in Sacramento for analyzation.
The most kind of strange thing for me was that the walls, forward and backward of that room, had knife marks, like somebody had been throwing a knife, trying to stick it in the wall.
At the time, I had been using hypnosis. I had gone to 2 different training sessions to learn hypnosis to get recall from witnesses. We took Justin and put him under hypnosis. And under hypnosis, Justin didn't actually say that he saw anything, but he described watching Love Boat. And then in detail talked about a fight and talked about Sue and talked about at the end that Sue was thrown overboard.
I had indicated body placements, which were, from what I understand, very close to being correct, if not correct.
He heard the loud noises, the scuffles, the noises that were being made in the living room, and that he was probably peeking out from behind the bedroom door.
Police artists have drawn these composite sketches of the 2 suspects. If you know anything about these murders or recognize the men in these drawings, call 1-800-78-CRIME. Help put these men behind bars. They are 2 of California's most wanted.
When I saw the composites, I did see my ex-husband in those composites, as well as a man that he had met over in the VA mental hospital.
Now, these are the pictures that came out in the newspaper of the people they thought had done the murder or committed the murder. And we had noticed that if you took the top half of one guy and put it with the bottom half of the other guy's face, and it was almost a carbon copy of Bo and Marty. And this is what it would look like on one, and kind of like that on the other one. Mm-hmm.
Martin Smartt lived just around the corner, like maybe 3 houses away, 2 to 3 houses, but just around the corner. And Bo was a friend of his, and it's my understanding that they had met at the VA hospital and developed a friendship. And of course, the night of the homicide, they had visited the bar in the hotel, and people just were suspicious of them.
He wanted to stop in and see if Sue would go down to the lounge with us. And I tried to tell him no, that she wouldn't go. She doesn't drink. She's not that way. And he said, well, Bo needs a partner. And I said, well, she won't go. And he insisted, you go and talk. You go ask her. And so I said, well, okay, I'll go ask her. But she won't go. And I did. I went and asked. And she didn't want to go. And so they were both upset about that.
Okay, so Marilyn here just admitted to going into the cabin that night to ask her. So without an established timeline here, I mean, how many people can corroborate this in terms of other neighbors, etc.? Also, how much nervous energy is that of her just rocking in the chair at certain moments when she's discussing certain things? I mean, again, I'm not saying that's because she's responsible for anything. Just perhaps she knows something she's not saying.
I did wake up. It was, it had to have been probably 2 in the morning or so. And I heard noise, and I did get up, and I went to the bedroom door, and I saw them burning something in the wood stove.
So, whoa, where was that information at the time? Was it all covered up, or did she just make this up after the fact now that she wants to blame Marty, as some allege? So, that's curious. So she's admitting here that she heard a bunch of noise at 2 a.m. and then they're burning something? Does that strike anybody else as odd? Because all the initial reports time of, unless the vast cover-up and the fix was in immediately. But did she not say this immediately? Or is the sheriff just that buddy-buddy with Marty Smartt? It doesn't seem like he's that smart, though, so there would have had to have been some kind of law enforcement complicity to cover this all up. We'll be getting into that later. But here are the friends, so-called friends of the Sharps, who are supposedly also friends with other individuals in this kind of soap opera ordeals. I mean, we're dealing with Sheila's previous pregnancy, the baby that Sue Sharp gave up for adoption that Sheila wanted to keep. So here are the Meeks.
Well, Marty had went to Reno the day after the murder, and he come home about 5, 6 o'clock. It was in the afternoon, and he was real high on something. And he kept saying, well, I got to go to Keddie. I got to go to Keddie. And I'd say, Marty, you don't need to go to Keddie. Somebody's out there killing somebody, and you don't need to be going. And he says, well, I got to go. And he was walking up and down the room. He says, I got to go. There's something I got to finish. Something I started that had to be finished. I've got to go finish it. And I kept arguing with him and saying, Marty, you don't need to go. I'll take you in the morning. But he kept saying that over and over. I got to go back. I got to go there. Something I got to finish. Something I started. Something I got to finish. I have to go. And I finally talked to him about 9 o'clock at night. I talked him into staying. He says, okay. He said, I'll stay. But all that evening, he was just like a caged animal, walking up and down, and repeating himself. And sometime, about 4 o'clock in the morning, he got up and left. And he went, I guess, to Keddie.
And what do you think he might have been? Why do you think he needed to go down there?
Well, I think that maybe he knew where Tina was. I think that maybe he left some evidence there that he had to get rid of.
We went to the Smartt residence and, with their permission, searched the residence in an outbuilding, looking for any kind of clues that might, connect them to the crime. And then Department of Justice had some agents assigned to the case, and they extensively interviewed both Bo and Martin, and then myself and Ken Shanks, we interviewed them. We went to great detail to make sure in our own minds that they were not involved.
They were going through the cupboards. Marty was a chef, and he had all kinds of knives and so forth. They found, I guess they found like duct tape. They found his knives and stuff. I think one was missing or something. They found a hangman's noose that was way up on top. They found Hustler magazines that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, that's definitely very relevant.
They found a jacket down under the house that belonged to Tina that had some blood on it. They also found the kids there was a little shack just up the road and from our cabin, and the kids had a little clubhouse type thing in there. And the police, when I went out to get some clothing, the detectives and the sheriff, some deputies that met me out there, and we went up to the clubhouse, and I noticed something that I know wasn't like that before, and I questioned whether Tina might have been held there because the floorboards were torn out. And I know the kids didn't do it. We asked. And it wasn't like that when I had been out there that weekend. But the floorboard was tore up, and we kind of wonder if maybe that's where Tina had been.
Wow. Okay. So this is some very damning testimony here from Maryland. However, other individuals involved in this case and local there, they stated that that building that she calls the Playhouse was completely boarded up and inaccessible. So nobody could have, you wouldn't even be able to tell if the floorboards were torn up and that the kids never went in there in the first place. Now, does that mean that she couldn't have been held there or somebody couldn't have forced their way in? Supposedly, it was in such shambles and it was just not accessible. That's what people have said. Again, I don't know, but let's continue here.
Marty was always calling on the phone with little tidbits of information. Normally, they were things that were designed to throw the suspicion somewhere else.
So he's laughing here that Marty is throwing suspicion elsewhere. This sheriff, Thomas, is laughing about this, about his supposed buddy doing this. Interesting. And he did not recall anything about a blood-stained jacket belonging to anybody, let alone Tina being found. Interesting. I mean, obviously this guy can't be trusted. This is the same guy who lived in the cabin where these murders took place previously.
Yeah, there were several things that brought some suspicion to Tina. The fact that the wires that were used to tie the boys came from Tina's bedroom. Of course, she shared that with Sue. And then in doing an examination of everything in the house, we learned that a shoebox that had been made as a school project was missing from the kitchen. And we found that really strange. There was nothing else really missing from the house other than that shoebox. And we learned that Tina had a real liking or a fixation on that tool or that shoebox. And we just assumed that when she left, that shoebox went with her. And to my knowledge, that shoebox has never been recovered.
I believe it to be approximately 2 days after the crime occurred. I was talking to my brother, and this is a story that my mother tells me. I was speaking with my brother, and I was telling him some details, I was talking to him about the crime.
Casey and Justin were playing on the floor. I remember that. I don't remember what day. It was just right after it, though. And I caught Justin saying, "No, Casey, you have to do it this way." And he was having Casey stabbing. He said, "'Cause I have to stop your arm." And so Casey was supposed to try and stab him, and then he would grab his arm to stop him. And then I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and Justin was saying, "I have to protect Sue. I have to protect Sue." And then Marty, he grabbed Justin, and he jerked him up, and he said, "You will never talk about this again, ever." And he took him outside, and I don't know what was said to Justin outside. But Justin didn't talk about it again.
How disturbing is that account? What does everybody make of that account? Well, first of all, Justin, this stare that Justin has, I mean, it's kind of disturbing. I mean, clearly this kid's been through some trauma, but it seems, does this trauma never leave him? Or is it just because he's talking about it here? I mean, this is just so sad because a lot of these individuals involved with not just this trauma, but any other trauma or murders, I mean, it's kind of sad, but a lot of them probably never really have a normal life again. I mean, it's really rough, but it also makes it difficult to assess the validity of what is being said. As far as Marilyn goes, I don't know what to make of her at all. I can't tell if she's just lying about everything, if she's telling the truth about everything, or if she's just mentally insane and she thinks she's telling the truth when she's not. I mean, I'm not getting any kind of read from this woman at all.
After Marty threatened him is when he shut everything down. Up to that point, he was talking to Doug. But then when I think Marty caused him to forget, because we are almost certain he knew that Tina was gone. He knew she was missing. He knew that the female out there was Sue. He knew that it was Johnny. He knew that it was Dana. All of the blood, the glass, all of that. He could describe all that stuff. So either he walked to the scene after the fact, or he could have been standing. The way it was situated, he could have been standing in the little hall next to the doorway and could have seen it all. Tina would have had to come all the way down the hall where he would, and his tennis shoes. They took his tennis shoes, and they told me that there was evidence that he had walked through the scene on those tennis shoes. We don't know what happened to those tennis shoes.
Wow. And then, of course, Sheriff Thomas here doesn't recall anything about the shoes. He doesn't seem to recall anything about anything, but wow, this is all quite damning if this is true. If this is all true, very damning. And also, is there yet a third theory where Sue was taken from her bed and they never bothered to take Tina? Or if Tina was pretending to still be asleep, or maybe she was really asleep, they dragged Sue out into the living room. And then there's the altercation with Johnny and Dana. Now, what if Justin here is in the hallway creeping up on the scene? He doesn't know what's going on. He hears it, and then Tina hears it also, and she encounters Justin in the hallway there. What happens after that? And then if Marty Smartt is not involved in any of this, is it possible, just because if he is dealing drugs with the sheriff or whatever, he just does not want anybody talking about this at all, and that's why he's pissed at Justin? Or maybe he never liked Justin in the first place, but regardless, maybe that triggered something. Even if Marty's not involved, is it possible that it triggered something? He yelled at him so badly, maybe even hit him, whatever, to never speak of it again. I mean, again, there's just so many variables here. It's kind of impossible to definitively state what exactly is going on here. There's a couple more mind shocks in this video here, so let's skip along.
Okay, we've kind of moved it a little bit, and I think you've seen it before. But the timeline pretty much starts here with, look at the date that it actually starts. It even has stuff mentioned from June of 1980, and then starts working through with, some of the victims involved and other, people that could be involved, to where it reaches, let me find it. The time that the homicide occurs, and then some of the investigation that was done afterwards. And
now, where would it start back in June?
I think just some information they got while the investigation was going on that just may kind of set the stage for certain things or possibilities.
So apparently they didn't want to answer any questions, but the cameraman here filmed something from their own timeline? This is kind of weird. Let's look at this. So Michael Bowers, who I couldn't find any information on here. I mean, is this another neighbor, friend, police officer, whoever, said that the composites look like Martin Smartt and John Sessions or Wade Dale Meeks. So let's clarify the Meeks situation. So Glenna Meeks, supposedly the friend, possibly best friend of Sue Sharp. Now, her sons, Richard and Wade Meeks. So Richard and Wade are brothers. Richard Meeks was the boyfriend of Sheila. It is rumored that they were the ones who were the parents of the child Sheila gave birth to and Sue gave up for adoption. Supposedly, Sheila and Richard, as of 2008, which is not that recent, were reunited and are living together now. 2008 now. Again, I don't know any of this information. This is put forward by cabin28.com. Supposedly, Wade Meeks was also involved with the much older Marilyn Smartt, according to the rumor mill. Okay. So that's Wade Meeks. Now, Richard Meeks, again, the former boyfriend of Sheila. Wow. Okay, then. Is everybody following? So, Michael Bowers is stating that the sketches here look like Wade Meeks and Martin Smartt. So, let's get into Richard Meeks and the Meeks family in general. So a lot of things just don't add up here. So this is from a Tapatalk forum posted by Zodiac Hoax. I'd like to see actual reports of statements made to investigators by Richard Meeks for a ton of reasons. 1. The Meeks family was all up in the Sharp family business. Glenna was apparently the first real girlfriend Sue made in Quincy. Johnny supposedly spent every Friday night with the Meeks, even after the Sharps moved to Keddie. So Johnny was not supposed to be in the cabin that night, and neither was Tina, and neither was Dana. I mean, this is all crazy. Richard is supposedly the father of Sheila Sharp's first child. Richard's older brother, Dale Wade Meeks, was such a pimp that he supposedly dated Marilyn Smartt and introduced Martin Smartt to Sue Sharp, not Glenna Meeks. Dale Meeks. By the way, if Dale were the father of Sheila's baby, he could have been charged as an adult with statutory rape of a minor. On the other hand, it seems Sheila and Richard remained close over the years, so who knows? At the same time, Tina Sharp is being sexualized by neighbor men in the trailer park. I don't know if I went over this in episode 1, but supposedly Tina was abused by some predators in the trailer park. Sheila was having sex with someone in the Meeks family. Then on April 12th, the night after the Cabin 28 murders, the entire Smartt family spends the night with the Meeks. Glenna is all over Josh's documentaries, but the funny thing is, Richard's statements are all over the timeline. 2. Richard's version of Johnny and Dana's day is very different than Sheila's. 3. Richard is the one who says it was Wolf, real identity totally unknown, who stole the pot, not Johnny. And we'll get into Johnny and Dana's alleged drug business and crimes later. 4. Richard is the one who told Stoy that Steve was in Keddie high on speed the night of April 11th. How would he know unless he was in Keddie too? 5. Richard said that Steve told Richard that Steve picked up Johnny and Dana from the Exxon and drove them to the park and back to the Exxon between 9 and 10. Now, why drive them to the park and back unless they're buying and or selling drugs? Good question there. 6. Richard is the person who spread the rumor around school that Martin Smartt and Bo Bede killed Sue and the boys and took Tina. Interesting. 7. Richard's alibi for the time of the murder is he was supposedly with Mike H., Angus L., and Steve at the arcade. No one checked Richard's alibi. For what it's worth, Steve was considered a liar by the Dorises. Now, the funny thing is, no matter how unbelievable Richard's story might sound, it's frequently corroborated by others. Let's say more or less it's true. That means several people driving cars either spoke to or gave rides to Johnny and Dana all over town, probably dealing drugs. Then someone drove them to the entrance to the resort about an hour, give or take, before the violence started. That is, Johnny and Dana had no intention of going straight to Keddie. They planned to hang around the Exxon, meeting various acquaintances, going here and there back and forth to the Exxon for a couple hours before going home. That is the only lie any of the witnesses, especially Richard, may have told was about the reason for Johnny and Dana hanging around Quincy and the Exxon that night. They were dealing a little. Wow. Okay. You know what else is weird, though? You have members of the Meeks family who are friendly with Johnny and Dana. Then you have members of the Meeks family who are friendly with Sheila. And then you, of course, have Glenna Meeks friendly with Sue Sharp. So, and this is the home that they are at the morning of their last day alive. Anybody else find all of this coincidental? They're also all friendly with the Sharps as well, who stay with them after the murder. Is any of this making sense to anybody? So, of course, one of the theories we went over in the previous episode is that the Meeks family was involved in the murder of Sue, and possibly everything else got out of hand. Maybe it wasn't even designed to be a murder. Maybe it was only supposed to be some kind of beating as revenge. But supposedly the Meeks were willing to take in Sheila and her baby and have them live with them. And Sue, if this is all true and Sue did not allow that, that's the motive there. Now, how exactly the Smarts are involved, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms regarding if Sue rebuffed Marty's advances and whatever, or if they really were having an affair, and then Marilyn found out about it. So there's overlapping motives from both the Sharps and the Meeks, if this is to be believed. There could also be third parties involved that gave the Meeks and the Sharps false information about Sue, which led to some of this pettiness and then ultimately the murders. Now, what about overlapping drug business with Johnny and Dana? Again, all of this is just so insane. I mean, this is so many different levels of soap opera, and yet none of it can be rectified. I mean, because how do you match this? This is one of the most baffling cases ever. It's really hard to match any of this up. So, let's circle back to the sketches supposedly resembling Marty Smartt and Dale Meeks. So there's a post here on Zodiac Killer Hoax 1986.freeforums.net by Horon, June 6, 2017. These two geniuses managed to get themselves arrested several days after the murders. A PCSO deputy wrote this report, The Jailhouse Exchange Between Marty Smartt and Dale Meeks. At approximately 2:40, April 18th, 81, I brought in Dale Meeks. I placed him in front for the booking window. A subject named Person of Interest was in the other and holding cell. When POI observed subject Meeks, he became enraged. He began to beat on the door, yelling, "Put him in with me. I'll break his expletive neck. Tell them where the dope is, Meeks. Put him in here with me. I'll find out." All these statements and many others were yelled at the top of his voice while beating on the walls and door. At approximately 3 a.m., subject POI lowered his voice from a scream and stated, "You know I got her, Meeks, and I'm gonna get you in the same way." Subject was removed from the area at this time. The other thing that's kind of weird, I'm gonna interject here. So it's Glenna Susan Sharp is her name. And then we have Glenna Nina Meeks. So Nina Meeks, also Glenna Meeks. Their first name is both Glenna. Not Glenda, Glenna. How popular of a name is Glenna, and how it's just another coincidence in the coincidence stack? I mean, I don't know. Okay, continuing on here. The subject was removed from the area at this time. At the bottom of the report is the date April 18th, 1981, time 3:30, and the name of the reporting officer. A supplemental report that coincides with the above, a reporting officer writes the following. On April 18th, 81, I talked to Dale Meeks prior to his being released from custody on a drunk driving charge. Meeks told me that POI and POI's friend Bo had been at the back door bar in Keddie Saturday night, April 11th, 1981, with POI's wife, Marilyn. I like how this is obviously Marty, but they still keep referring to him as POI. They had walked Marilyn home and then returned to the bar after changing clothes, and Marilyn had fallen asleep, so she does not know what time they returned home. However, they were there when she awoke the next morning. I asked Meeks how he knew this, and he said Marilyn told him. Meeks said Bo had left for Klamath Falls, Oregon on Tuesday, April 14th, 81, as he had taken Bo to the bus depot himself. Meeks also told me that Justin had said the police did not check the river thoroughly enough, and that POI spent a lot of time at the Cascades on the river. I asked where the Cascades were, and he said he does not know. Wow, that's curious. So Marty gets into a fight with, well, by the way, is Marty, we'll get to it in a moment with the documentary, is Marty in jail for a knife fight? And then Dale Meeks is there for a DUI. But supposedly, in this written report, Marty stated, "You know I got her, Meeks, and I'm going to get you in the same way." So this guy gets into a lot of knife fights, and that's the statement he made. I mean, that's insane. Now, yeah, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Someone else has said that there's houses and barns called the Cascades 6 miles north of Camp 18. So somehow Justin knows this? What in the heck is going on here? Because this is April, and Justin is telling them to search the Cascades? Or a collection of houses and barns called Cascade, 6 miles north of Camp 18, near where Tina's body was ultimately found. What in the heck is this? How much does this 12-year-old Justin know at this time? Also on the forum, there are people saying this. Supposedly, Glenna Meeks said she saw a piece of paper written by Justin that said Marty was the killer. Again, not that this paper has never been produced anywhere. These are just the words of Glenna Meeks. And then, of course, Marty acting all crazy after he returned from Reno and had to get back to Keddie, allegedly because there might have been some evidence he needed to cover up. Another poster posted this. I have wondered the same thing. Was Marty scared of something or someone, and that's why he and Bo got out of town so fast? The rent was supposedly paid up until May 1st at Cabin 26. He wanted Marilyn back. Bo left on the 14th, not exactly sure when Marty left. They both told law enforcement exactly where they were going, and even the name of the hotel they'd be staying at. Doesn't sound like they were running from the law, but they were running for another reason. Also, there's another report here that mentions Marty acting paranoid after the murders and claiming, quote, they are after him. Really bizarre. Really, really bizarre. Let's continue with the documentary here. So, wow. Terry Alger said that he knew that Martin Smartt and another guy who he didn't know had done the murders, and he stated it was because of a big dope deal, and someone was at the wrong place. Alright, so the only information on Terry A here is from a forum. I don't have the source here. someone contacted him. I contacted Terry A. and talked with him about the information he supposedly had on the Keddie murders. Terry said that he knew POI and another guy who he did not know had killed the people at Keddie. I asked him how he knew they were the ones responsible. He said that they had to be, because they were Vietnam vets, and were always talking about killing someone. I told Terry that I had heard that he was telling people around town how the killings had been done, and that he said it was because of a big dope deal and someone was at the wrong place. I asked Terry where he was getting his information, and he started getting evasive and said he could not tell me now. I asked him if he had ever told anybody that a guy named Ted had been talking in his sleep. Terry said he did not remember, and I got the feeling that he was not telling me everything. Terry did say that Pat and Joe, who managed the Meadow Valley Inn, knew some things and they were not talking because they were scared. Terry also said that a guy by the name of Gary E. knew something. Gary is supposedly to be camped somewhere in the Meadow Valley area and drives a white International Stepside. Terry said that he overheard Pat and Joe talking on the phone on a few occasions, and something was said about the middle fork of the Feather River and how he thinks that the two guys who had done the killing may be hiding out down there. Terry also said he heard Oregon mentioned in phone conversations. Terry said that Pat and Joe had photographs of the two men. I am very unsure of Terry and how much he can be believed. This is from a PCSO report. Another report here, Terry A. reported being shot at while hitchhiking on Meadow Valley Road. I have asked Terry to take a polygraph examination, and he has agreed, although somewhat reluctantly. All right, so that's pretty much the only information on this Terry A. fella. So is this just a guy spinning tall tales, or does he actually know something? But let's continue with the documentary here. So that's interesting. So Marilyn Smartt reported that Bo Bede told her it wouldn't bother him to kill a child or a broad. Did she make that up? Who knows? But he's living with her and her husband Marty. So Martin Smartt gets arrested for getting in a knife fight, and then Marilyn never sees him again. And what are the details of this knife fight? Is this with this? If Martin Smartt is innocent here, and these whatever drug dealing people killed Johnny and Dana. See, if Sue Sharp was not the target and Johnny and Dana were, so someone follows them back, or maybe whoever gave them that ride, which we'll get into in the next episode, all the details there and the Johnny and Dana angle. If these drug criminals are the ones who did all these killings, is this who Martin Smartt got into a knife fight with, and that's why he left town and why he told police exactly where he was and where he was staying, because he was not fleeing from the police and his buddy the sheriff for the murders, for the Keddie Cabin murders, but he's fleeing from these other drug criminals that they're the true perpetrators, and he wouldn't blow the whistle on them because then they'd kill him and his family. Is that a possibility?
When they released him from jail, he was told not to come around the Meeks' house, not to notify me. He was told basically, get out of town. I've got to back up a little bit. You know, my daughter was living with us for a while. She was terrified of him, and I didn't know this. But she ran away, and she went back up to Oregon with her stepmother because of him. And after all this happened, she received a phone call up there, and she does not know who called her. But it was the same night that, the next night after it happened, she received a phone call up there telling her that she could be next if she didn't keep her mouth shut, which scared her to death. She has no idea who it was that called, because at that point they didn't even know anything about it up there.
Okay, is there any verification of that story? According to Keddie28.com, everything Marilyn said, or just about everything, is a lie. But can we verify that report? If that report can be verified, someone called her daughter in a different state, telling her that she could be next roughly 24 hours after the murders. Does this make any sense to anybody here? Like, how is she connected? How is Marilyn's daughter, who no longer lives there and who was not living there at the time of the murders, how does she connect to all of this? Wait, what? What the? Okay, this is just, unless this isn't true either, I'm assuming there has to be some, how did they tell Sheila, okay, how did they tell Sheila Sharp that Martin Smartt was dead in 1997 when he's not dead? Wow. I don't know what to make of this sheriff's office.
I received a postcard, and this was many months later, like 6-7 months later. I received a postcard saying, all it said was, Bo is dead. Marty. That's all it said. I don't know how he died. I know that it came from Portland, Oregon. I'm assuming that's where they were at.
It's just the idea that at least 2 people committed this crime, and it's just bothersome to know that they're still not apprehended, that they're still out there. If they were capable of committing such a heinous crime in 81, like you say, 22 years ago, it's just amazing that they haven't committed some other ones since then.
Okay, so what does everybody make of that? I mean, this is just really, really bizarre. You have these false reports of people dying who are not dying. And why would Marty randomly send his ex-wife information that Bo Beat is dead? I mean, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, that's just, I mean, what does that have to do with anything? Does everybody send their ex-wife postcards that some guy that lived with them however many years, 20, 30 years prior for however many weeks, is now dead? It's kind of weird, unless there's more going on there. So here's the other point here. It seems to me that it's very possible, is this all to make Marty look guilty if he's not? Because if the sheriff's department, if they all know he's not guilty, would they make up statements that he's, this jailhouse altercation stating, I got her? It's just, it's weird. It's almost like some of this is being planted. Maybe even planted by Martin Smartt himself. There's also, is it possible he told this counselor, admitting to the crimes? Because he knows he's innocent, but he also knows that they're going to pin this on him. So he's playing some kind of weird game here. And it's like, if he knows for sure that he's innocent, I mean, this is really rough. Is it possible some of these individuals might have split personalities? ThoughtCO.com has a write-up on the Keddie Cabin Murders, where it states this: while being polygraphed, Justin told the polygrapher that he thought he saw the murders. He said that a noise woke him up. He got up and looked to the door into the living room. He said he saw Sue Sharp laying on the sofa and that there were two men standing in the middle of the room. He described the men, one with black and dark glasses, the other with brown hair and wearing army boots. John Sharp and Dana came into the room and began arguing with the two men. A fight broke out and Dana tried to escape out through the kitchen, but the man with the brown hair hit him with a hammer. John was being attacked by the man with black hair. Sue tried to help John. Justin said at this point he hid behind the door. He then saw the men tying up John and Dana. He also claimed he saw Tina coming into the living room holding a blanket and asking what was going on. The two men grabbed her and took her out the back door as Tina tried to call for help. He said the man with the black hair used a pocket knife to cut Sue in the middle of her chest. Justin worked with a sketch artist and came up with composites of the two men. So a harrowing account there, but that's supposedly what Justin told during a polygraph examination. So let's go to PlumasNews.com that has a 3-part write-up. This is part 3. Disclosed truths. There's more damning alleged evidence against Smartt. Even though he's dead, evidence provides a clearer picture of what happened inside Cabin 28 that night and why and how he and Bo Bede were allegedly involved in the deaths of 4 people. 2 years ago, Gamberg told the Sacramento Bee and others that a counselor, who will remain anonymous, at the Veterans Administration in Reno came forward with information concerning Smartt. He said Smartt confessed while he was his patient. This occurred during a 7th appointment with Smartt just weeks after the Keddie murders. Smartt allegedly wanted to clear his conscience and admitted to killing Sue and her daughter, Tina Sharp. Quote, I killed the woman and her daughter, but I didn't have anything to do with the boys, end quote, according to the counselor's recollection from May 1981. Smartt could have been under the false assumption that what he told his counselor would remain confidential, but the law states otherwise when it comes to a confession of murder. DMAC, who has researched Smart's alleged confession, pointed out that the counselor said that while Smartt was talking about Sue's murder, Smartt was a 0 during the confession. No stress, flat effect, until he mentioned Tina. When asked why Tina didn't run away, Marty indicated he'd incapacitated her, according to the counselor. DMAC is inclined to believe Tina was already dead. Even the counselor didn't ask for more details, or Smartt didn't provide any. When asked for motive, Smartt told the counselor that he was convinced Sue was responsible for Marilyn wanting a divorce. In looking at what's been amassed concerning the Smart's troubled relationship, there are many reasons why it wasn't working out for the couple. It seemed doomed from the beginning as one follows the dysfunctionality of their relationship. Smartt told his counselor he had to kill Tina because she saw the whole thing. I couldn't have a witness. The counselor said he advised Marty he needed to turn himself in. The counselor said his patient just smiled at his advice. When asked about a polygraph test that law enforcement requested Smartt take soon after the murders, Smartt said to his counselor, quote, I beat it. Those things are easy to beat. I was lying and they let me go, end quote. Some allege that he actually failed, but his buddy, Sheriff Thomas, told everybody he passed, because they either had some drug business or whatever. Gamberg said that in an earlier session with the counselor, Smartt was so angry that they couldn't achieve a worthwhile dialogue. Although the counselor couldn't remember the name of the woman Smartt was angry with, Gamberg said it was Sue Sharp. The counselor told Gamberg that he alerted the authorities, DOJ at the time, and was surprised it didn't lead to the arrest. The counselor said that he called DOJ and asked for the special agents working the Keddie case, the supposedly compromised agents, Bradley and Krim. He said he told him of the confession, and he was told the partners would like to meet him. Gamberg said that the agents did meet with the counselor, but they dismissed his allegations as hearsay. Whoa! Here again is part of the evidence that makes Gamberg and DMAC strongly believe that the Keddie murders were part of a cover-up. Nothing else makes sense to them. Again, Bo Bede was probably a person of interest to DOJ, and they in part were helping him. But more than likely, it was part of a bigger conspiracy. DMAC points to the possible involvement of 2 alleged corrupt DOJ special agents and their potential involvement in the big drug smuggling operations then backed by the CIA in the early 1980s. Also, Smartt, so this is like the Tom Cruise movie American Made, and the Barry Seal situation, smuggling drugs for the CIA. Also, Smartt went on to tell the counselor that allegedly he and Sheriff Doug Thomas were friends. Thomas lived in cabin 28 prior to the Sharps' arrival, both Gamberg and DMAC learned. It was an easy walk along the Keddie Resort Road from cabin 26 to cabin 28. They could have met in the bar or allegedly have been involved in nefarious activities. Smartt said Thomas allegedly allowed him to live in cabin 28 for a time when Smartt was having marital problems with Marilyn. Okay, hold on a second here. So supposedly, not only does the sheriff live in cabin 28 where all these people are murdered shortly after he no longer lives there, but the neighbor, Marty Smartt, also lived in cabin 28? Does anybody find this strange? In information recovered by DMAC, Thomas was asked if he knew Martin Smartt. Thomas said he and Marty were great pals, and Marty spent hours with him while on patrol. Thomas said that Martin and Marilyn Smartt allegedly came to him once for marriage counseling, but he said he pointed out he was hardly the person to give advice. Thomas was recently divorced. Wow. What happened? The night and early morning hours of the murders have been the subject of intense investigation. There's discussion that the 2 men had time to change from their suits into jeans and denim jackets before entering cabin 28 and allegedly attacking Sue Sharp. One of the individuals who was in cabin 28 that night reported under hypnosis that he saw 2 men wearing jeans and jean jackets. Under this theory, they subdued Sue Sharp, partially changed back to their suits, and headed back to the bar. Just before closing time, they could have returned to cabin 28 and continued their alleged abuse. Gamberg, however, thinks that the 2 men allegedly subdued Sue Sharp and then returned later in their suits. He doesn't believe they took time to change clothes. He doesn't believe they wore denim that night. Another individual said he saw Smartt burning clothes in a wood stove later that morning. Gamberg did not name the individual. There is no evidence that bloody clothing allegedly worn by 2 men during the crime was recovered, and the clothing would have been bloody, Gamberg emphasized. Blood-spattered clothing, socks, and girls' shoes were found in the living room of cabin 28 by investigators, but they seemed to belong to members of the family and not potential killers. Besides what clothing the 2 men allegedly wore, there's a slight time discrepancy. Smartt told special agents they left the bar before 2 a.m. Gamberg said his source saying she dropped John and Dana off at cabin 28 between 10 and 11 p.m. And again, it's actually, some people believe the source is a male and not, the person who dropped them off. The boys went to the front door, Gamberg said, not around to the back to John's bedroom. There was no outside light on, but the driver could see light from inside the cabin. She said it was real eerie. She said she was afraid and uncomfortable, Gamberg said. She left immediately. Wow, this is really creepy too, because this is kind of weird. Is this just an intuition thing? Like why was there a need to say that? I believe they probably went in the front door. The faint light could be the bathroom light or Sue on the couch with only the TV on. I do believe Johnny and Dana were in the basement when the killers entered, and Sue was fast asleep in the small bed just inside the girls' bedroom door, DMAC explained. John's bedroom could only be accessed outside in the rear of the cabin. DMAC believes they heard a noise, possibly a scream, and ran up the steep flight of backstairs to see what was the matter. For some reason, that lower room appears never to have been processed by law enforcement. If that room had been processed, there might be evidence that the 2 teens were there before they were murdered. Dana was a diabetic and would more than likely have left his insulin and other evidence behind, according to DMAC. Either way, the two teens walked into a living nightmare. There's a likelihood that John rushed to support his mother, who was allegedly being brutalized by Smartt, Bobede, and probably others. John was immediately assaulted according to the evidence. At some point, Dana started to leave the room, but he was savagely struck in the head from behind with a hammer or the Daisy 880 pellet rifle DMAC claims was used in the crimes. Gamberg believes the torture, especially of Sue Sharp, continued for quite a while. This was no spontaneous event. The killers were in cabin 28 for a while, he said. DMAC believes the blood found on the bottoms of Sue's feet and evidenced in a few bloody footprints in the living room show that someone walked her around to see what she had allegedly made them do to the other victims. Smartt would have been aware of when railroad crews started a new shift early that morning and made sure they were all well away from the cabin by at least 4 a.m., April 12th, according to DMAC. Smartt and Bobede would have walked home to cabin 26 and gone to bed. Smartt stated to special agents that he was at home until around 10 a.m. the following morning. Fact or fiction? During one of 2 hypnosis sessions, Justin Smartt described a dream he had that involved a boat and what was happening to the passengers on the boat. Justin is the 12-year-old boy who spent the night of the murders with the Sharp boys. Under hypnosis, Justin describes the day he'd had. I just thought of something else too. Okay, is this all coincidental? But the last names here are Sharp and Smartt, both meaning highly intelligent. I mean, is this just another coincidence? I mean, that is kind of weird, though. I mean, Sharp, I guess, Sharp and Smartt are both not the rarest last names in the world, but they're also not that common. I mean, I don't know, kind of weird. Under hypnosis, Justin described the day he'd had. He said that later in the day, Sheila and Tina were next door at the Seabolt's house. Tina came home about 7:30 p.m. to wash the dishes and then returned next door. Sheila was spending the night there, but Tina had to return home. Justin said that Tina returned around 9:30 p.m. Okay, so Tina is at the home, then she goes to the Seabolts. Then she comes back at 7:30, then goes back to the Seabolts. Then she goes back to the cabin 28, the Sharps, at 9:30 p.m. and goes to bed. Wow, okay. Justin, Ricky, and Sue Sharp were known to have been watching The Love Boat on TV before going to bed at 10 p.m. That seems to be the theme, as he described an alleged dream in which 2 men were involved in a fight with John and Dana, and they got thrown overboard. In the dream, one of the men had a pocket knife in his right hand and cut Sue Sharp in the chest. He also said the same man had a hammer in his other hand. DMAC is first of all a skeptic when it comes to hypnosis, but he's especially skeptical when it comes to Sheriff Thomas conducting the first hypnosis session with the youth. Or as Joe Pesci would say, with the Ute. Thomas attended 2 different training sessions to learn hypnosis, especially to get someone to recall witnesses. Not long afterward, he was using it on a possible witness in perhaps the worst crime in Pluma's history. So his only experience were 2 training sessions at that time, is that correct? According to the transcript of an interview in 2003, Thomas said that he did the hypnosis with Justin, according to info from DMAC's website. Under hypnosis, May 19th, 1981, this time by Dr. Jerry Dash, a psychologist at the Children's Hospital in LA, Justin told of Tina Sharp. He said Tina allegedly woke up and appeared in the living room to see what was going on. She was carrying a blanket. According to what Justin said under hypnosis, a man allegedly grabbed her and carried her through the kitchen and down the back stairs. The man then returned, removed a hunting knife that someone had stuck in one of the walls, picked up the blanket, and left again, according to Gamberg. Gamberg said that the residents of one of the neighboring cabins reportedly heard a muffled scream. When they didn't hear anything else, they went back to sleep. The scream could have come from Tina inside the house, according to DMAC, or it could have come from her when she was carried outside, Gamberg said. They agree that apparently there was only one scream that might have come from Tina, and then it was silenced. That's when they believe she was killed. The two investigators have different ideas about what happened. Gamberg believed that someone noticed Tina when she walked out of the bedroom, grabbed her, and took her down the back stairs and killed her. She was probably stashed in a nearby vehicle and then driven away at some point. This could have been at any time since no roadblocks were established and vehicles weren't searched. The location of some of the vehicles in the area was photographed as the DOJ helicopter flew over Keddie about noon, April 12th. And supposedly the Meeks vehicle was there as well. DMAC believes that Tina was murdered inside the house. DMAC believes Tina was attacked in bed alongside her mother in the opposite bed when the killers first entered the cabin. DMAC doesn't believe she woke much later, as Justin claimed, coming out of the bedroom carrying a blanket. The only blanket found in the crime scene was the one Justin claimed to have used to cover Sue, which evidence shows came from the bed in which Sue slept. He believes that she was roused when they went into the bedroom to grab Sue Sharp. This is evidenced by blood spatter discovered in that room, he said, including blood on both beds. She was then carried outside and across the narrow swinging bridge to the other side of the Spanish Creek, according to DMAC's theory. She was left there until someone had time to take her body to Camp 18 near Feather Falls. To use the swinging bridge, the individual carrying Tina would have risked notice, even at that time of night, even in the dark, and the swinging bridge is outside of Keddie. Instead of following the main road around Keddie, the individual would have gone right off Spanish Oak Drive. That road winds around and then comes out into an open area. The bridge was close to a house. Gamberg knew the people who lived in that house in 1981. They had dogs that barked and would have alerted them to someone or something coming onto the property. Gamberg believes the owners would have greeted anyone with a loaded firearm. And then there's the discrepancy about whether the gate on the bridge was locked or open. DMAC believes it was left unlocked on that particular night. Actually, DMAC pointed out sheriff's report that showed that the gate was always unlocked, including that night. The gate is also high enough that no one could have climbed over it. If the gate was left open, then there would still have been the risk and challenge of carrying a blanket-covered girl the full length of the bridge from one side of Spanish Creek to the other. The way to access that part of the river is along a private drive and past at least one home, according to Gamberg. But when considering risk, DMAC pointed out that to drive out of Keddie, someone would have had to pass the two-story dorms and hotel, as well as approximately 20 cabins. But if they put the body in, let's say, even in the back seat covered up or in the trunk, maybe they wouldn't have been that scared to do that. I don't know. The bridge does seem riskier. Smartt and Bobede. Smartt told law enforcement that the first time he met Bobede was at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Reno while both were in the psychiatric unit. According to Gamberg, a man named D. Lake reportedly drove Smartt to the VA in Reno. Lake was a veteran, and supposedly Lake's car was also photographed by this DOJ helicopter at the scene. Some people believe they borrowed his vehicle to dispose of Tina's body. Lake was a veteran service representative at Feather River College back then. Lake and Smartt may have met on campus or in Keddie. Lake allegedly had several other friends in Keddie. In his third therapy session, Smartt told his counselor that he was suffering from PTSD. This was about the time the term started being used, according to Gamberg. But Gamberg doesn't believe Smartt had any reason to have PTSD. Lake allegedly might have suggested it to Smartt as a way to get veterans assistance and possible benefits. Smartt did serve in the Army in Vietnam, but he was a cook on a military base near Saigon. One of the safest places to be during the war, Gamberg said. According to the counselor, he asked Smartt if he ever saw action or received rockets, mortar fire, ever even fired his rifle or heard gunfire. No, was the reply, but he stated when laying in bed he worried it might happen. When he was pushed on the subject, he admitted he was never fearful and that he had an easy tour in the military, according to DMAC's information. Bobede served in the Air Force, Gamberg said, but there are discrepancies in Bobede's timelines, according to DMAC. Bobede claimed to be several things, including a peace officer, which was proven to be untrue. In one account, Bobede said that he had to retire from Cook County Sheriff's Department because he was shot in the groin during a robbery. It's true, Bobede was involved in a robbery in which his uncle was shot in the groin by responding police, but nothing is true according to DMAC. Taking into account some of Bo Bede's known aliases and varying birthdays, he would have been 9 years old when he did some of the things he claimed DMAC worked out. What is known for certain is that Bo Bede served time for armed robbery in Chicago's Statesville prison in Joliet. He also served time in California, according to Gamberg. Jimmy Rini, whom DMAC considers to have been Bo Bede's de facto father after the death of his father and uncle, was heavily involved in organized crime in Chicago. Rini helped raise and mentor Bo Bede, and allegedly, Bo learned a lot from the outfit enforcer. Following Bo Bede's known trail, DMAC discovered Bo was in Vegas at multiple addresses, suspicious addresses on many levels due to their locations and their history. Bo was not in Vegas by chance, he said. Bo Bede was allegedly involved during this time with people heavily connected with moving large amounts of drug and money around. I've maintained Bo was in Vegas as an alleged enforcer and desert hole digger. This is when Tony Spilotro was destroying the mob's stronghold over Nevada gambling during his bloody reign, DMAC said. And DMAC maintains there was a connection with a group known as the Chicago Outfit, run over the years by Al Capone and Sam Giancana, who also had control of interests in Nevada gambling. Bo Bede was allegedly long involved with law enforcement in that it involved payoffs and the law looking the other way, according to what DMAC has learned. It might sound a bit wild on the surface, but DMAC has done his homework when it comes to Bo Bede's link to organized crime. He's also found many links with Chicago's mobs and activities in various parts of the U.S. DMAC wrote in 2013 about Bo Bede's alleged activities, but we definitely have Bo associated with Hyman Larner in the 50s, and Hyman Larner as the controlling operative with the Bush-Reagan CIA drugs for arms deals. If that was Larner's and the CIA's coke being trafficked in and out through Plumas, as it definitely was just south in Yosemite and Mariposa County, the case has come full circle. If Bo was allegedly connected higher in the ops than previously believed and asserted, then he wasn't just a loser drifter down on his luck, according to DMAC in January 2014. DMAC bases much of his research on the newspaper coverage and books about Chicago's organized crime from the 50s through at least the 80s. According to some in-depth research into VA records in Reno, there's proof that Smartt was a patient there, but there are no records that Bo Bede was ever there in any of its medical departments, DMAC said. It also has profound implications on the gravity of why Bo was in Keddie, as well as Marty's and others' local law enforcement alleged connections in 1981 involvement in the drug trade, according to DMAC. Bo Bede left Plumas County April 14, 1981, right after his interview and release by DOJ. Lake drove him to Reno so he could catch a bus to Klamath Falls, Gamberg said. As these connections are pondered, it makes sense why DOJ sent 2 organized crime special agents to Keddie instead of special agents from homicide. Smartt probably didn't mean anything to DOJ, and the family and friend who lost their lives were unimportant to them, but Bo Bede could have meant something. Gamberg has repeatedly said that the entire case of the Keddie murders was handled badly. Hagwood recently repeated that it sat for years in the local sheriff's office without anyone doing anything to move towards solving it. And as pointed out before, the sheriff received a job with Post, Peace Officer Standards and Training, just 6 weeks after the murders. Both Gamberg and DMAC believe that no one can be vetted for such a position in the DOJ in just 6 weeks, even in 1981. Smartt also had a record, according to Gamberg. He believes that the 2 were allegedly involved in con games, including selling fake ads and subscriptions to non-existent magazines. Was that like a big scam back then? Curious. A notice for bogus solicitations appeared in the Five Feather Publishing newspapers April 1st, 1981. April 1st. It stated, an organization identified as law enforcement report has been soliciting donations for advertisements in a CHP yearbook or CHP journal. Both are non-existent publications. In Shasta and Tehama counties, solicitations have been made by telephone, and in at least one instance, the caller identified himself as a CHP sergeant. The CHP is not soliciting money for these non-existent publications, nor has it lent its name to any organization for the purpose of obtaining donations or advertisements. Citizens receiving calls should notify their nearest California Highway Patrol office. I wonder if there's any recordings of those and if they can be matched to Bo Bede's or Smart's voice. DMAC's research uncovered this notice. Both he and Gamberg believe it's exactly the kind of scams Bo Bede would have gotten Smartt involved with. This tells us that Marty and Bo didn't meet at the VA unless Bo was a visitor, DMAC explained about the notice. This appeared April 1st, which means it was happening long before. It takes time and many attempted scam calls before it percolates up from several complaints across many counties and then through law enforcement channels and then to the public through newspapers, he explained. When Smartt and Bo Bede left Reno together, Bo Bede was invited to share the Smart's 2-bedroom cabin. In one of the interviews between Smartt and law enforcement, he talked about getting Bo Bede's medication and making sure it had the correct dosage. Smartt then said that Bo Bede was out for the night, meaning unconscious due to his medications. It's unknown if Smartt was saying that as part of the alibi, that Bo Bede would have been sound asleep and couldn't have been involved in the murders, or if he's just mentioning it. Regardless of when they met, DMAC believes that Bo Bede called the shots. Although the murders might not have been Bo Bede's idea, there's nothing to suggest he wasn't involved, according to Gamberg. Looking back, actually, you know what? What if Bo Bede was involved with some kind of drug deal gone bad that Johnny and Dana were involved with? And something happened there, and Martin Smartt, being friends with Bo Bede, what if the plan was to murder everybody in the house, including the boys, but he made sure that Bo didn't do that because his son Justin was among the boys? I mean, this is all really weird. Looking back, the crime scene and Keddie weren't handled right from the very beginning, Gamberg said. The scene wasn't immediately secured. Jamie Seabolt from neighboring Cabin 27 not only helped Rick and Greg Sharp and Justin outside the bedroom window, he admitted that he went up the back stairs and into the cabin to see if anyone else was left alive inside Cabin 28. It's unknown if he deliberately interfered with the crime scene, but he could have tracked through it, potentially contaminating evidence. And Don Davis, Sue Sharp's brother, was reportedly at the scene either just before or about the same time as Sheriff's Deputy Hank Clement arrived, according to DMAC's research. Reportedly, Sheila Sharp called her uncle right after resort co-owner Jan Albin phoned the sheriff's office to report the murders. Under Sheriff Ken Shanks was reportedly second on scene, and then Sergeant Jerry Shaver. Sheriff Thomas arrived at 8:50 a.m., Gamberg said. Okay, hold on a second. If someone were to make the case that this case is a psyop, we have the Sharps, knives are sharp. We have Ken Shanks, the undersheriff. We have Sergeant Jerry Shaver. Obviously, shaving is done with sharp blades. I mean, is this too many coincidences? I don't know, man. Sheriff Thomas arrived at 8:50 a.m., Gamberg said, according to his records. Investigators Dennis Forcino and Al Brubaker, who were fishing together at Antelope Lake, arrived at the scene as soon as they could manage. Davis arrived very early at the scene. In a video of him taken some years following the murders, he didn't say whether he went into the house when he first arrived. What he did say on video was that there was confusion about who the victims were inside the cabin. Initially, the sheriff's office thought the victims were Sue and 2 of her children. Later that day, Don said they brought out the bodies for him to identify. Davis said he recognized his sister and nephew John and someone he didn't know, which was Dana. Davis said that about 2 hours after he got home, he was asked to go to Anderson's mortuary in Quincy and help determine if the female victim was his sister or niece. He said he determined it was his sister. When Gamberg was asked to confirm Davis's remark on the video, he said the bodies were taken directly to the coroner's office in Sacramento. Gamberg said there is no evidence in his files that they were taken to Quincy first. Wow. Okay. That's just another weird thing. On scene, what has totally stumped DMAC is how quickly DOJ special agents were in a helicopter flying over the scene April 12th. That is kind of weird, isn't it? Considering the logistics of getting a call at their homes near Sacramento, getting a helicopter, and then flying time, he alleges Thomas may have contacted them immediately after he learned of the situation. In other words, he wasted no time in contacting DOJ, organized crime agents. Gamberg said Thomas must have made the decision before viewing the crime scene, or just shortly after. And you know what? The phone records would make that clear. Did Sheriff Thomas call DOJ immediately after receiving this call himself? And why would that be? But how would the sheriff know the crime deserved the attention of organized crime agents unless he immediately deduced Bo Bede was involved? Or is there a theory that Thomas himself might be involved? How would Thomas know Bo Bede, who had only been in Keddie for 10 days? Not the month he told law enforcement and DOJ. Each made it clear they'd never met. Keddie wasn't immediately secured, Gamberg said. Although law enforcement took down license plate numbers of vehicles that were present, no one set up a roadblock and searched vehicles for evidence. That evidence could have included Tina Sharp. Indicating the list of license plates numbers taken down that day, Gamberg said there were certain vehicles known to have been there that day and identified in aerial photographs that don't appear on existing logs. How curious. There's one road in and out of Keddie, Gamberg said. Without securing the road, setting up a checkpoint, anyone could have smuggled out anything. There are at least two differing opinions of what happened that night. They vary slightly. Gamberg, who was familiar with Keddie in 1981, said that late at night it was so dark you could hardly see the hand in front of your face. It was that dark. Gamberg believes the predators were already with Sue Smartt. The teenage boys arrived unexpectedly, walked right into it, and probably tried to help her. It was a rough, brutal fight, but the predators were there for a while. It wasn't over quickly. It's Gamberg's opinion, based on what he knows, that Sue was the last one alive. She was made to witness what happened to her son and his friend. She probably saw what happened to her daughter earlier. This is the end of the 3-part series for now. Okay, so a lot of issues here, but they do bring in a good point because, wow. This is really tough because we don't know the exact arrival of Johnny and Dana. We don't know whether Tina, we don't know the order anything happened when it, really, I mean, we don't know when the perpetrators arrived. I mean, it's kind of impossible to do anything here. All we can do is go through all the different possible theories and what stems from them, but there doesn't seem to be any verification of any of this. But the most frustrating thing is the evidence exists. Now, whether it's in the files that were misplaced, whether it's just with the individuals involved, I mean, a lot of these individuals are still alive. So there's really no reason this case should not be solved. So we're only really beginning to scratch the surface here with just the amount of information available. The amount of suspects, just the amount of people involved is just not necessarily involved with the crime, but involved in knowing these people and the area and not being able to kind of nail down the comings and goings and the timelines. It's just really problematic, but there's actually other suspects that some believe are really good suspects. So again, plenty more to go over. This will probably end up being a really long series, just the amount of information to go over. But hope you guys found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting and informative. If you enjoyed the podcast, want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share the podcast, keep up awareness in unsolved cases. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.